Our hen house is a squawking house. Our hen house is their hen house. Our hen house, ooh, it's a funky fresh house. Our hen house is your hen house.
Hello and welcome to Our Hen House, a place to find our way to change the world for animals. Joining us today will be Robin Lamont, author of The Chain, who will be telling us all about how her works of fiction are informed by her passionate feelings about what is happening to animals.
Then we'll be joined by two very special guests. Sofia Annunziata is a Brooklyn teenager who is making a big difference in the lives of lots of dogs and cats. And she'll be accompanied by a very special four-footed friend who you are going to fall in love with. In fact, you might get lucky and get her to go home with you.
Wait until you see this dog.
She's
I might go home with this dog before anybody watching this has the opportunity to. This is indeed going to be a fantastic show. So please, without further ado, pull up some hay and let's get squawking. Hello, Marianne. Are you excited? I know you always get excited when we have the four-footeds on the show.
Yeah, I know. It's the best. It's the best. I'm very excited about all our guests, but especially about
Beanie.
About our little Beanie. And I'm very excited that we've been going to the beach lately. Finally.
Finally, it's summer. It's summer.
It's not really summer. All right, no singing. It's not really summer unless you get some time at the beach.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about the beach. It was
I guess
the
it's summer in the middle of the country sometimes, but not really.
It's not summer in Brooklyn unless you go to the beach. And we went to the Rockaways, which is close enough to Brooklyn to call it Brooklyn.
It's Brooklyn's beach.
Yeah, no kidding.
You get there on the A train.
Queens. It's not Queens independent media. We're going to talk about it and pretend it's Brooklyn. Certainly those seagulls who hang out there are Brooklyn seagulls because
I would imagine.
they have attitude.
And they're beautiful.
They are. And
they're beautiful. They're pure white.
Large.
And they kind of take over the beach after everybody's leaving, and they're a little impatient.
Have you seen
as
their
you're
attitude?
leaving the beach. It's
They're
they're hovering over you.
They're like,
and then they're diving into the garbage can, ripping everything out.
I know. They
my
want
kind
their
of folks.
They
what
want
can I
their.
say? They're so pretty too.
They want their food, just like we do when we're at the beach. And luckily we can have it because the vegan selections at Rockaway Beach are pretty spectacular.
Oh, but they're beyond spectacular.
Well, we have Rockaway Taco.
Tofu tacos.
Which you can't say.
It's not easy to say.
But you can eat. I've seen it.
Tofu tacos.
I saw you down two of them.
Yeah, well, it's this beautiful, is it sautéed tofu? And then loads of guacamole and radishes.
A side of fried plantains.
They're absolutely the most gorgeous tacos. And then the side of plantains.
Oh, God. It is. And the watermelon juice.
The watermelon juice.
As well.
What a meal. I don't even like to eat a lot of food when I go to the beach because it makes me feel kind of...
Which is really good for
I don't
when
want to
you're
go in the
bathing
water.
suit.
You know the whole thing where you're not supposed to go in the water? Your mother always told you don't go in the water.
Your mom was lying. They were all lying.
Actually.
No, she was because her mother lied to her and her mother lied to her.
You're actually not supposed to go in the water.
It's not true.
You can get a cramp.
No, you can get a cramp if you're just walking on the street.
The riptides out there, it's pretty strong.
Yeah, I think those seagulls would save me if
I didn't actually go in the water.
No,
yet.
you didn't.
I'm working up to it.
Anyway, aside from going to the beach, let's talk about a few other things that our hen house has been up to lately. I wanted to chat about this article that we published on our online magazine over at ourhenhouse.org. This was written by Jessica Ava, who is a phenomenal activist that we've gotten to know.
She's an amazing activist.
She's written a few pieces for us, and we just interviewed her on our podcast over at ourhenhouse.org.
She's done all this stuff with farm animals and looking at factory farming in India and other places in the developing world.
She was working with the Brooklyn-based organization brightergreen.org.
Yeah, that's right.
But now she's over in Kathmandu, where she's saving the lives
of around
street dogs.
Jessica.
She's working with an organization called Street Dog Care. Now, I want to take a step back and talk about street dogs for a moment from a personal perspective, because you and I have done some traveling in different countries where there have been street dogs everywhere, including Grenada and Puerto Rico. And it's a little bit jarring because here in the United States, when we see a dog on the street, generally speaking, what do? Well,
they're a stray dog. We immediately feel that they need to be rescued, and I mean, hopefully there's a shelter that they could be brought to, or we have to find a home for them. it's a whole different scene. The dogs don't belong out on the streets.
And oftentimes shelter is a little bit of a, you know.
And when we were in Puerto Rico, actually, we should show that video sometime. But there was that dog that we helped rescue, and he was very badly injured. Yes. And it was very much get these dogs off the streets. But that's not really the attitude in Kathmandu.
She blew my mind, Jessica.
Yeah, I know. It was really, it really turned my mind around about, or just expanded my perspective. Because in Kathmandu, there's a large street dog population. And Kathmandu is apparently, you know, it sounds like very like peaceful and like everybody's just walking around chanting. Apparently it's not like that at all. It's very hectic, noisy, crowded, bustling place. And there are these dogs everywhere.
Small tangent, Jessica mentioned on our podcast that it's very easy to be vegan there, but I digress.
Oh, maybe we should go.
I think we should. And volunteer with Street Dog Care. They're looking for volunteers.
So it's this particular part of Kathmandu that this organization, Street Dog Care, works in. And what their goal is not to get these dogs off the street. It's to help the dogs. If they're injured, the dogs can you know, be brought in, and they'll care for them until they're better. They also do spay and neuter, and if they're sick, they can get care. But then they're put back out on the street, which sounds very counterintuitive to Americans. But you know, when you think about it, what Americans do with overpopulation and what other countries do, we clean it up.
Yeah, exactly.
We just collect all these dogs and make them go away.
Out of sight, out of mind, right? Out of sight, out of mind.
And then we kill a lot of them.
Yeah, they get
very cleanly.
And so
it's all clean.
It's jarring in a way to see them, but in a way I think it's good.
Well, she makes the point that she's not saying that all street dog issues are just fine, that there are dogs out on the street in many places and there's big problems and the dogs can suffer a lot. But because this organization exists in this neighborhood, the dogs get enough care and they have really serious lives. They have friends, they have families, they have societies, and they have lives out on the street that you would be depriving them of if you brought them into your home and, you know, left them in a crate like 12 hours a day, like some dogs in the United States do. It's a very different perspective on what dogs are all about.
And you know what this makes me think of, since I'm apparently the tangent queen today, is that they are all individuals. And I remember when we've been talking about farmed animal issues a lot on the show, and they also form social circles. I've seen chickens at sanctuaries, for example, who it's so clear who they like and who they don't like, and who you're going to mix them with and who you're absolutely not. And so
animals have complex lives.
When you start to look at it from their point of view, you know, I know I've told this story. I don't think I've said it on the TV show yet, but when you lost your cat, when your cat died, I remember you were mourning. This is before we were together, so it's your cat. And I remember you were mourning this cat, and you said,
Fergus.
All his little thoughts. And that saying, all his little thoughts, just really stuck with me in terms of animal rights, because all of these animals whom we exploit and objectify and commodify, they're all individuals. And these street dogs in Kathmandu really bring that point home, don't they?
She did actually end up, I mean, she also made the point, I don't want to forget to say that the other thing that Street Dog Care does is educate the people,
right,
and to make them not afraid of the dogs and make them, you know, bring people together with the dogs so they can actually be friendlier. And it's having this organization there that makes everything work. But she did actually, ironically enough, because, you know, she's talking about not adopting these dogs. She did adopt a street dog herself.
She didn't mean to.
It was just, you know, this dog was a puppy and very badly injured. So in taking care of the dog, she got so attached.
I think
and
the dog
got so
attached.
Well,
exactly.
I think they both did.
Yeah. And later,
and she still worries about it, whether the life she's able to give her dog is you know, the right life, because dogs they're not just ours. They're not, you know, they belong to themselves.
Right. In fact, a moment ago when I said that Fergus was your cat, I was thinking, well, Fergus was Fergus's.
Yeah.
Fergus was he was your kitty cat. But what else is going on in the world? Let's talk about Canada and what's happening there.
Oh, Canada. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about the seal hunt because of the huge decision at the WTO, the World Trade Organization, which sounds very dry, but it's probably the most important thing that's happened for animals in, at least on a legal level, in a very long time. Of course, I mean, I think most people have heard of the Canadian seal hunt, and it's very brutal. And Europe, several years ago, actually passed a law banning the importation of the seal skins. And I think we have a little video just introducing people to the seal hunt. if they haven't heard about it.
Let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
My name is Rebecca Aldworth, and we're flying off the coast of Newfoundland towards the commercial seal hunt. A half an hour before dawn this morning, the slaughter started in earnest. 17 vessels have hailed out, and we're on our way to find them. It's going to be slow, it's going to be spread out, and it's going to be very difficult for us to catch those moments when they are killing the seals. A baby seal has been shot or clubbed and killed here on the spot. And that's all that remains. Right now there is a baby seal on a pan of ice just below us, and he doesn't know that right now there's a sealing boat coming for him. He's just been shot in the head. The sealer's just come up and he's clubbing him. The Canadian government isn't here to monitor this killing, so there is no way that they can tell us that this killing is humane. They simply have no idea what's happening out here on the ice floes. He's swimming. As hard as it is to be here, I know that we are so close to shutting this slaughter down forever. Please stand with Humane Society International and the Humane Society of the United States while we work to make Canada's commercial seal slaughter history.
Bad stuff.
It's hard to watch.
But I mean, it is one of the issues that people actually know about. A lot of people know about the Canadian seal hunt. It's been an issue of the focus of a lot of activism over the years. And as a result, this law was passed in the European Union to actually ban the import of the sealskins, which is pretty enormous.
That is enormous.
And it's not just in Canada. The Canadian seal hunt is the most well known. There's also a Norwegian one and others around the world. But Canada decided to go to the World Trade Organization and complain that this European ban was in violation of free trade rules, which of course, you know, most countries in the world have signed this treaty to have free trade with each other, and they said, well, you can't ban our fur. And it went all the way, it's been going on for years. I mean, these cases become so complex. And finally went through the appellate body at the World Trade Organization, which upheld the right of the European Union to ban the import of these sealskins. I mean, there were a few complications, which aren't worth going into really. The basic fact is, and what makes it so important is that the principle was upheld that the European Union was allowed to do this on moral grounds. They were allowed to take a moral position that they thought that this brutality to these seals was wrong, and as a result, they're allowed to ban the import of these sealskins. It's a mind-blowing decision for animal lawyers and animal advocates because that's never been clear before. It's never been clear that a country could ban the import of products that came from animals who were treated cruelly based on moral grounds. That's never been part of the law before, and it is. I can't even tell you how enormous the implications of this decision are.
What would the implications of it be?
Well, I mean, just as one example, I mean, the European Union also has banned a lot of farm animal practices, such as battery cages for hens that lay eggs and gestation crates for pigs. These are very brutal practices in which farm animals are kept in these very, very small conditions. I mean, factory farming still exists in the European Union, but some of the very worst practices have been banned. Now, if the World Trade Organization had not come up with this decision, the importers in the European Union could be importing these foods from other countries where it's cheaper to produce them because they're not using these particularly brutal conditions, and undercut all of the European suppliers who aren't allowed to use these conditions, these horrible things. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Any progress for animal animals would be undercut by the fact that cheap imports could come in from other countries, and that the country with the better standards would not be able to ban the products from countries with poorer standards. I mean, I hope I'm making this clear here. It's a complex decision, but nothing more important has happened for animals. It means that it's possible to make laws limiting cruelty to animals in commercial products and not be undercut by imports from other countries. And if that had not gone through, it would just be all over. I mean, there'd be no point in passing laws to protect animals.
What else is going on internationally? I feel like we keep talking about different international issues
this is
today.
a very international show.
But there's a lot going on to discuss.
Well, there always is. And actually, this is really, and I think this is an interesting counterpoint to the World Trade Organization case, because it has to do with the Netherlands, and which is a big, you would be surprised to hear, mink farming country.
Wow.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of countries in Europe that do a lot of mink farming, and the Netherlands was one of them, and they actually very admirably banned mink farming in the Netherlands.
Well
even though
done.
even though it was well, wait until you hear the end of the story.
Oh.
So the mink farmers brought this to, of all places, the European Court for Human Rights. And actually, after also the cases wound through the courts, the European Court of Human Rights has decided that this ban on mink farms is in violation of the mink farmers' human rights.
Are you kidding
No,
me?
it's a terrible, terrible decision. People are very upset about it. Yeah. And because it's actually banning their business, and it's not like it's regulating their business, which of course would be okay, but it's banning their business, putting them out of business, or something like that. That's my understanding of the decision. So that's a really unfortunate decision.
That is unfortunate.
And you know, it could have major implications for, you know, the rest of Europe. If other European countries, as I said, there's a lot of fur farming there. If other European countries decided to step up to the plate and get rid of it, this is, you know, what we like to call rising anxieties, I think.
Yeah.
It's really just when there are reforms for animals, the industries really, really get into gear, and institutions, even ones as that you would hope to be progressive, like the European Court of Human Rights, can be dragged into this sensation that we can't make all these changes. We're changing everything in the way we feel about animals.
I know that we've discussed before that when you first joined the animal rights movement, you really started with these fur protests.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of, I mean, it was when I was going vegan, but one of the reasons I started with fur protests, as you mentioned, is that there was one right in my neighborhood. It was Zamir's Fur,
In Soho.
and they were, yeah, that was when I lived in Manhattan, and it was in Soho, and it was on Houston Street. It was disgusting. It was this loathsome store, and every Saturday a group of people used to protest in front of it, and I joined them. I was really nervous. It was scary, but I got to know a lot of people. A lot of people I still know. It's kind of amazing.
It was an interesting group, but
Yeah.
don't you have...
Yeah, I do. I'm getting there. Yeah.
I want to make sure you get to this story, because I know that we have a dog waiting to come out later.
I'll get to it. The neighbor, actually, I had an elderly neighbor and her daughter, and I knew them all quite well. Her daughter didn't live within my building, but walked by one day with her family, her husband and her children. And they were like, "What are you doing here?" You know, they don't expect to see their middle-aged neighbor protesting at a fur store, but... and I said, you know, it's awful what they do to these animals, and it's so cruel and brutal, and they were animal lovers. And so they were very affected by it. But she came up to me a few days later, and she said, you know, we looked into it. It was so upsetting. And we found out the animals are bred for that. They're bred for that. So apparently, you know, like you hear people say that all the time.
You mean they're not
when it
picked
comes
up
to
off the
farm
ground
animals.
for as roadkill and
Yeah,
then
but
stripped by a bunch of monks? That's not how fur is produced?
But I mean, I think she meant as opposed to trapped.
Right.
Trapping seemed very cruel to her. But as long as, you know, it's as if people don't breed animals. I mean, foxes breed other foxes, or God maybe creates a fox. But people get this idea that if people breed animals, they totally control them, they totally own them, then they can condemn them to, I mean, you know, when these little foxes come out of the womb, do they say, oh, it's okay that I'm going to suffer for the rest of my life, my short life, and then die, because I was bred for that.
Yeah.
It's just, but you hear that all the time.
But you opened their eyes just by being there. And I mean, I think that's...
No, and then they kind of closed them again.
They closed them
It
again.
was successful.
Well, that was,
but I did my best.
That was 20 years ago. I'm sure they're watching our show right now and they're...
saying, oh my God, that's that woman who used to live downstairs for Mom.
Unfortunately, even though the law may be moving in the wrong direction sometimes anyway, I believe that attitudes toward animals are definitely headed in the right direction.
The law is not where we're going to find change.
There's reason to hope.
There is.
And our next guest is someone who always makes me feel that way. Robin Lamont has been a Broadway star, a private investigator, an assistant DA, and most importantly is now not only a passionate animal advocate, but a talented mystery writer. I love this woman and her writing.
Yeah, I totally do too. But before she joins us, please take a quick look at this video, which will also bring you hope. In a world where white-tailed deer are seen as either a nuisance or as dinner or both, it's a reminder that maybe they don't think of themselves as quite that expendable. And there are plenty of people who don't either and are willing to lend them a hand.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
Thank God that had a happy ending. Can you imagine if we were like, let's watch this video, and here's the horrible ending. Happy endings are sometimes hard to find in animal rights, and that's why we need people to make them up sometimes. Which brings us to the subject of fiction. We haven't got enough of it.
We really do not have enough of it.
But we do, fortunately, have Robin Lamont, who is in the business of writing amazing novels with animal rights themes. Welcome to our Hen House, Robin.
Ah, thank you. Very nice to be here.
We're so excited to have you here.
In that video, you can't make stuff like that up. Well, I guess you could make stuff like that up, and if it was you, you'd probably put a whole mystery on top of it.
I might, and that was sufficient as it was.
Yeah.
Very sweet.
The moment when he screamed, oh my God.
I know.
Poor baby.
I know, and it just, it makes me realize the importance of, bringing these animals to life.
That was a little story.
It was. It was a little story. And Robin is definitely a story creator. Let's talk about The Chain, Robin, because we have a lot of ground to cover with you, but this is a book that we bring up in our household daily because, as we just mentioned, there isn't enough fiction that speaks out for animals, but you're changing that. Tell us about The Chain.
Well, I'm trying to. I am a suspense novelist and have some background that helped me get to that place. I was an undercover investigator for a while. Then I was an assistant DA in Westchester County.
Wow.
And so there are a lot of people and a lot of stories that all kind of came together for me as an author. And my first two books were mystery books, but with a social consciousness. And that was really important for me to hang on to that. And during that time, I became aware of what was happening for animals on our planet. And my entire consciousness changed about it. I was transformed. And I decided that I was going to commit to writing a series of suspense novels that for the first time featured an animal rights investigator. And with each book I could bring a world of what's happening for animals and their suffering and how they're treated in many ways, and bring that to light through mainstream fiction.
I think it's just the most brilliant concept in the world. I mean, partly because I absolutely love mysteries. I read mysteries all the time, but you're right. I like them to have a little bit more going on than just the story. That the idea that they should have some kind of social message just makes the story that much more interesting. And I love that this is going to be a series. It's such a brilliant idea for a series. Now, tell us a little bit about Jude, who is a fascinating character. I've only read about her in the one book. I can't wait to read about her again.
Oh, thanks. Well, Jude Brennick is the heroine of the Kinship series. She's an animal rights investigator with an organization called the Kinship. And she's a troubled young woman.
She is. She's not a simple character.
She's not a simple character, but I don't think any really good character is simple. She's got a lot of pulls in different directions. And it's interesting and fun for me that she's also evolving in this next book, and hopefully will continue to grow and evolve in terms of her her passions and her background.
Well, how does that work, just as a writer? Is this something that almost takes on a life of its own, that the story gets to the point where it's writing itself? I'm just curious, because whenever I'm reading a novel, I think about it all day. It's in the back of my head, like this other little world that I'm lucky enough to be watching. For you as the writer, how do you come up with the story arcs, especially when it brings in animal rights?
Well, for me, for these books, what I've done is to choose a particular area. And the story needs to evolve and grow organically out of that. The Chain is about a town in the Carolinas, and Jude is pulled down to this town because a whistleblower in the town, where there's a pig meat processing plant, has videotaped the abuses to the workers and the inhumane treatment of the animals that are going through the slaughterhouse.
It's a very timely story. We're seeing those undercover investigations come out in real time with great frequency.
Yes.
But what I love here is that you go deeper into the story than frequently we're able to in reality. Yeah. And you really explore some of the personalities.
Well, yeah, I mean, here she's drawn down to this town, and when she gets there to meet with this guy, when she gets there, he is apparently committed suicide. In the video he made is gone. So that is what spurs her to continue and try to find out what happened.
Well, I don't want to reveal what happens in The Chain too much, because I want everybody to read it because it's so good. Can you tell us but you mentioned that there's another Jude episode in the works, which I can't wait for. Can you tell us where that is going to take place?
Yeah, well, I am almost done with the first draft. It takes a lot of editing, as any writer knows.
Yeah.
You guys know that. It's called The Trap. And in this, Jude actually goes undercover. So that's a particular interest of mine, since I did do some undercover work myself, not in the animal world. And for writing The Chain, I interviewed a number of undercover investigators.
Oh, you did? That's great.
Who worked in factory farms and slaughterhouses, and really tried to get a sense from them what it felt like to be undercover. It's a funny kind of place to be.
Totally. I'm fascinated by that. And we've talked to undercover investigators as well, but it's just hard to imagine. And by putting it into fiction, I think you get us closer than people are really able to talk about it. What are their stories like?
Well, I think, it's layered.
Yeah,
the first layer
totally.
is the kind of backstory you need to create for yourself, which is very, very important, because you need it. It's like you need it to be solid so that you can draw on your story of what character you are playing in real life and in any situation, and often stressful situations. So you need to have that really down. At the same time, it's not a lifeline. It's only a tool. I used to feel, when I did some undercover work, and I worked in the area of counterfeiting, and I worked for a PI firm that went after counterfeiters in New York and this whole area. And I would play a role where I'd come in and offer to buy larger and larger quantities to try to work our way up the chain of sellers and manufacturers. But for me, what it felt like was walking a high wire, and you've only got this wire in front of you, and one false move and you can fall, and there's nothing to grab onto on either side.
You're all alone out there.
You're all alone out there. Even if there's a backup waiting outside in the car, you are alone. And for the undercover investigators who work in factory farms, they have the added burden of having to witness the excruciating suffering of these animals on a day-to-day basis.
Wow, I mean, art imitates life, imitates art, imitates life. Like you were saying, these are very timely issues. Are you going into the wildlife realm? Is this what's happening next?
Yes, I am. In this next book, The Trap, Jude goes out to a town in the northern Rockies where a wildlife services agent has been murdered and is caught in his own leg-hold trap.
Explain a little bit about, for people, what wildlife services is, because it's one of the craziest names for an agency, as if we're serving wildlife. That's not exactly what it's about, is it?
No, it isn't. Well, Wildlife Services is indeed a real agency. It's a branch of the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and their stated mission is to help humans and wildlife coexist. But what is being revealed in the last several years is that those two things are not aligning with what they are really doing, which is killing animals by the millions. I think in 2013, it was just reported they killed 4 million animals, and many of them in just horrific ways. They catch pets in their traps. They use terrible traps that even state hunters and trappers cannot use. And so this next one is kind of taking on what is really happening out west in particular with Wildlife Services. And
the Wildlife Services has even been active right here in New York City with the geese.
Yes.
We had somebody on a few weeks ago talking about that. So they're all over the place killing animals.
Is your mind being blown as you're researching these items that you put in your books? I mean, I was saying about the fawn, you can't make that up, but you really can't make this up. I can't even imagine what the research process must be like for you, Robin.
Yeah.
well, it is a process, and one of the amazing things about this series is each book that I'm thinking about really opens me to a new area. I had never heard of Wildlife Services before I started The Trap. So I'm learning a lot about what is happening for animals all over, and it's pretty incredible. And my mind is blown.
I mentioned at the top of the show that fiction is definitely something we don't have enough as animal advocates, and that you're really changing that. Let's talk about fiction. I know it's something you're very passionate about. Talk about how you see fiction as a means of creating social change.
Well, I think the most important thing is that they're finding out. I mean, I write stories because I love to write them, and I love to read fiction. But neurobiologists are finding out every year that people can be changed by fiction. That not only do they step into the protagonist's shoes in a figurative sense, but that it's actual creating biological changes in the brain as well.
Wow.
So what you can do is you can help people create a feeling of empathy through the protagonist's shoes. You can create a lot of feelings that they will then retain in their own lives rather than just this fleeting read of a fiction book.
It's safe. It's because you're kind of guarded behind this character. So you almost don't have to confront these pieces of yourself that you would have to confront if you're reading like a book about psychology or just even a book about like education.
And like we were saying before, you can go into so much, or you manage to go into so much, that actual people who have done this work really can't convey, because they're not necessarily that good at that piece of it, of conveying it. And also it's themselves. It's harder to talk about yourself than to work on a character. And people have been making up and listening to stories since the beginning of time. It's obviously one of the ways that humans communicate with each other.
That's the power of the arts, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted you to come onto the show. And I know that you have a rich history in the arts. You mentioned that you were an undercover investigator.
That is an understatement.
But before you were an undercover investigator,
you've had 8 lives.
You were starring on Broadway a few times, in fact. So let's talk about what you're best known for Broadway-wise.
Sure.
Which is Godspell.
Yes.
And you sang what song?
I sang a song called Day by Day.
You're the one who sang Day by Day on Broadway and in the movie. We actually have some footage of this I'd love to show.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Day by day, day by day, oh dear Lord, 3 things I pray.
Brooklyn, you're that chick.
I've heard your voice about 10 million times in my life.
Unbelievable. And you also were starring as Sandy in Grease on Broadway as well.
I did.
It's so cool. It's just amazing how you brought this background into what you do now, because even though one might think that's a hugely different background than being a novelist, it's not so different. It's all characterization, it's all the arts, and it's all telling stories. Wouldn't you say that there's a correlation between the two?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the best actors, and I'm not one of them, but the best actors would tell you that they create incredible backstories for themselves that the audience never sees or knows about, but it gives them a foundation. And indeed, that's what brought me into private investigations, was the...
Of course.
Because you need to have those kind of skills.
Yeah.
And you spoke of a foundation. Well, your foundation is right here in Brooklyn, New York. Isn't that true?
Yes, it is, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because I love Brooklyn. I grew up on Remsen Street. I went to school on Gerolman Street, and Brooklyn is really my home.
Yeah, well, Brooklyn is our home here at our Hen House, and it's just so great to have you here with us today, Robin.
But I really want to get back to something you mentioned earlier in the interview, and that's when you woke up about animals. And I really want to hear what your story is, because you articulate these things so well, and I think it's something that's happened to so many of us. This life-changing, world-changing realization. And how was it for you? It wasn't even that long ago, was it?
It wasn't. It was only a few years ago, and for me, it started with my husband, who's always been a vegetarian, and he began to read about factory farms and would slip me the material. And over a period of time, I kind of opened up to it. It wasn't until I read Gail Eisner's book, Slaughterhouse, that it hit me right here. Sorry about the mic.
It hit me right in the
microphone. And it became very real for me about what was happening. And food, for many people, it's so present in your lives. It's there every day. Some of the things that I'm learning about animals, and wildlife, it's a little removed from us sometimes. But food is there every day. And to kind of accept that you just can't keep on doing the same thing, or that I couldn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, food is there every day, but so is the arts. And I'm really excited when both food and the arts are pro-animal and are creating change. And that is exactly what you're doing. And I'm sure that our viewers are going to go out and get the chain, because how could you not?
No.
This is a book that you're going to want to read. It's the summertime. It's perfect
so
time
good.
to curl up with a book. And thank you so much for joining us today in our Hen House, Robin. We are such fans of what you are doing to change the world.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just be warned, viewers at home, prepare to fall in love with our next guest. I am about to fall in love with this girl.
Yeah, absolutely. Sofia Annunziata. I like to just say her name.
Annunziata.
She's better known as Sophie, and she's a Brooklyn teenager who is really a hero to dogs and cats. She's the founder of NYC Teens for Animals, a volunteer at Pet Haven Animal Hospital, and a strong advocate of humane education. Joining Sophie today is Beanie.
Beanie.
Who's going to charm your socks off.
Beanie. You haven't seen Beanie yet. Wait till you see Beanie.
And Beanie's looking for a home.
Yeah, oh well, okay. And I might be Beanie's new mommy, I'm just saying. But first, before they join us, we want you to take a look at this charming video from Animals Asia. They just mounted a huge rescue of moon bears in China who are kept imprisoned and milked for their bile. This little guy, called Smudge, was one of the bears who was rescued. That video is completely precious.
Oh my God, I think we could just show Smudge pretty much all the time.
That's it. Our show is over. We're just going to have Animals Asia provide
Fortunately,
us.
we have new stars.
We have a couple
We're going
other.
to give Smudge a run for his money.
A couple other individuals are joining us today in our hen house who are also quite adorable. Welcome to our hen house, Sophie.
Thank you for having me.
And welcome to our hen house, Beanie. Hello, Beanie. You're lovely as well. Beanie is not at all intimidated by Smudge the bear, I must say.
He knows he can keep up.
She actually probably can't see Smudge the bear. She's blind.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And I almost called Beanie Smudge. Beanie is your foster dog, is that right?
Yes, she is.
Okay, so how long have you been with Beanie?
We've been fostering Beanie for a couple years now.
Wow. But Beanie is looking for a forever home, is that right?
Yes, she is.
Let's talk a little bit about Beanie to start, because I know you are passionate about animals, as are we, and that's why we're so excited that you're here with us today. So you mentioned that Beanie is blind. Do you know anything about Beanie's story? She was just found as a stray on the street in Brooklyn, is that right?
Yes, she was found on the street. No owner came to claim her. She was just probably thrown out, abandoned.
It's crazy, isn't it? These stories, these animals with their stories that we never know, and they're just tragic. But happy ending here.
You mentioned that
not the ending yet, but a happy interim foster care, and hopefully a wonderful new forever home. And she has a few other health problems. Where did she go when she was found on the street?
Sean Casey Animal Rescue took her in, and then she was sent over to Pet Haven Animal Hospital, where my mom works.
Very nice. And we have a dog as well. We have a beautiful pit bull named Rose. And I was wondering if you could tell me if there's any difference in having a blind dog in the house as opposed to a regular dog who has his or her eyesight.
Not necessarily, actually, when they get used to it, because she didn't go blind like right away. It was kind of like a gradual thing, and it got worse because she also has diabetes, and that's where that came from.
Okay.
And so once she got used to it, she's able to find her way around.
So dogs, they're just so skilled at adapt. You see three-legged dogs too. They just adapt to whatever problem they have and carry on.
What is Beanie like? What is her personality like?
She has spunk.
I got that from her, definitely. She does have spunk, and she seems like a very sweet dog.
And she's a Shih Tzu?
Yes,
is that right?
She is.
And if people were interested in having Beanie come live with them, would they contact Sean Casey Animal Rescue? Is that how they would find out?
They could contact Sean. They could also contact me on my Facebook page, and I'll tell them all about her, and then they could maybe come meet her, see if it would work out well for them.
Okay, well, let's talk about your Facebook page, because
it's quite a Facebook page.
It's New York City Teens for Animals.
Yes.
And
NYC Teens for Animals.
NYC Teens for Animals. What is NYC Teens for Animals?
Well, it started when I started it when I was 12, and it started out as just a page to kind of raise awareness. It was kind of like a how-to almost, like to tell people, certain things that they can do to help out, like donating, starting a donation drive at your school, little things like that.
Oh, that's a big thing.
That's a very big thing.
I think that's a great idea. And do you also encourage people to adopt rather than buy?
Yes, definitely.
What do you like what do you say to people when you find out they're thinking about buying a puppy?
Well, the first thing is you have to kind of educate people, because some people really honestly don't know.
Of course.
And so, you tell them about it. I've sent people links to articles and pictures and things like that. And it's actually worked. I've gotten a few people to adopt rather than buy a dog when they were going to.
Well, let's pretend that I was someone who didn't know the difference. So, Sophie, I want to buy a dog. What would you say to me?
Well, I would start off by telling you about puppy mills, which is where the mothers of the puppies from the stores are kept, and I would tell you about how horrible the conditions are and why it wouldn't be the best choice for a dog for you to buy one rather than adopt, because there are so many wonderful dogs up for adoption.
Yeah, it's
That's
so
for sure.
true. I don't even want to admit to you what I was doing when I was 15. This is a remarkable young woman.
The other thing, I don't want to pass by this moment without mentioning it. Like, the fact that we have rescues like Sean Casey here that will take in a dog like Beanie who has those medical problems, and it costs them a lot of money to help get that dog in a position where she is eligible to be adopted. And it's just so wonderful, because in many places this dog would just have been euthanized right away, you know, because people didn't want to spend the money. So I just want to give a shout out to all those rescues who are doing this heroic work along with the help of people like you, Sophie. It's really a miracle when these dogs' lives are saved, and they are the best. They know it.
Yeah.
They know that you
Beanie,
saved them.
Beanie,
she's the best. She's the best of the best.
Beanie knows that she's the Shih Tzu.
Oh my God!
I'm sorry. I couldn't not make that comment.
Oh, so unfortunate.
It was so unfortunate. Is it hard to be a foster mom? Do you just find an emotional tie to these animals?
Yes, often we've actually foster failed before.
Oh.
I didn't know there was a term for it. That's a great term.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, that's kind of the trick too. When you get somebody to foster, is to hope that that it just sticks.
Well, let's talk about humane education, because I know that that's something that we also have in common. We're all very passionate about it. You have been involved with getting humane education curriculums in schools, is that right?
Yes, I have. I've been working with North Shore Animal League, and they have this curriculum called the Mudagrees. It was created by North Shore Animal League, Yale School of the 21st Century, and the Cesar Millan Foundation. And it's kind of like a curriculum you integrated into the classroom, or you could do it in an after-school program for the kids. And it kind of teaches them how to be kind to animals as well as being kind to each other. So it kind of incorporates both.
Fostering compassion for people and animals.
Yeah, it's really great.
It makes me think a little bit about HEART, Humane Education Advocates Reaching Teachers.
There is a real push towards humane education, which is required in New York public schools, even though it's almost virtually never implemented.
Yeah.
It's actually required by law, and these schools should be stepping up to the plate and giving these kind of getting these kind of programs in their schools, which you know, could really make such an enormous difference for animals. Do you find that kids are uninformed about a lot of animal issues?
Yes, definitely, because their parents, their parents don't necessarily know about it, or if they don't tell their kids about it, so the kids don't know either. And a lot of times that's one of the biggest problems, is trying to educate the kids, especially because sometimes they could be pretty stubborn about certain things like that.
Well, kids could go home and teach their parents.
Yeah.
But I know you mentioned that your mom works with animals. Is that how you got awakened to animal issues?
Yes, definitely. I was raised in a house with animals. I came to the animal hospital with her from when I was 5 years old, so I've been around it for a while.
Do you feel like it's changed you, just your personality and the way you relate to the world, to have a big part of your heart devoted to animal rights issues?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would imagine.
You know, I really want to hear this story about this dog named John.
Yes, let's talk about John.
Because it's really just a moving story. And again, a salute to the people who are out there saving animals who you'd think could not be saved.
Yeah, so who is John?
John the dog was found on a hot summer day behind a parked car in a crate full of feces and garbage, and he was kind of just left for dead. He was only 18 pounds.
We have some photos. It's so dramatic. Really... And then was John then brought to Sean Casey, or?
Well, someone called Sean and they brought it directly over to the animal hospital, where I helped my mom take care of him for over the next month as he got better. And it was really an amazing transformation to watch.
We have some of the after photos here as well.
Yeah, I mean, amazing transformation. No kidding. I mean, this dog was at death's door, and look at him. He's just absolutely gorgeous.
When we had Jenny Brown on from Woodstock Farm Animal Sanctuary, we were talking to her about how dogs and all animals can really learn to trust again. So while John was being rehabilitated and just brought to more physical health, did you notice a change in his personality?
Definitely, actually. He does have a couple of issues as far as certain people, certain people he's weary of. Yeah. But other than that, he's amazingly playful. He's friendly.
Yeah.
It is amazing what animals can go through and then come back and still trust humans. They're better than we are, that's for sure.
We were talking about the fact that we have a pit bull. You have to meet this dog. She is so fantastic.
She's the best.
She's the best.
Well, except maybe for Beanie.
Maybe for Beanie. But a lot of people have bad impressions of pit bulls. How do you respond when someone says that pit bulls are violent, for example?
Well, you know, it's kind of hard to try to change people's minds about certain things that they're so set on. But you have to try to inform them and try not to get angry and yell at them.
Are you taking notes?
Sometimes it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes the dog speaks for his or herself. Sometimes all it takes is just, a few minutes being around a dog like Beanie who has, these health issues, but is clearly just bursting with personality and love, or to be with a dog like our Rose, who is just the most gentle dog ever.
Why do you think pit bulls have gotten this reputation? I mean, they're such sweet dogs.
Yeah.
Why do people think these things?
It's really hard to tell because it seems like every year it's or every couple years it's a different dog that the media is targeting.
Yeah.
And it's usually the bigger breeds. Like you don't usually see smaller dogs like Shih Tzus or Poodles.
Yeah, it's true. People just, like you were saying, people can be stubborn. They get these ideas in their heads, and I'm just so glad about organizations such as yours, the NYC Teens for Animals.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of pit bulls, I think that you're absolutely right. The media reports if somebody is bitten by a pit bull, it makes the papers. If somebody's bitten by a Chihuahua, it doesn't make the papers. It's just very uneven. They emphasize the fact that bad things can happen with pit bulls, and that's what people come away with.
Well, and every pit bull I have known has been remarkably gentle and docile, and
I know.
It's so much more about like the people behind the animals than the animals themselves. And what kind of reactions have you gotten, Sophie, for NYC Teens for Animals from people who come across the page? Have you noticed your friends and other people in your life kind of coming around when it comes to looking at animals from a different light?
I mean, my family, they're all really big animal lovers, so they already, a lot of them know about the stuff like that. I mean, some of them are kind of sensitive about the issues, like, oh, you don't want to look at that, but you kind of have to. You really have to sometimes.
Yeah. Well, how else are you going to find out what's really going on?
Yeah, that's for sure.
True. Well, I am so inspired by Sophie and by Beanie. Beanie, what are you doing down there, sweetheart?
I think she's sleeping.
I think that she knows that she's on TV.
She's remarkably relaxed.
I think that she's ready to be a star. And she is looking for a home, so that's inspiring. And you're inspiring as well, Sophie.
Thank you.
You're a passionate Brooklynite as well. You live here in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
And you go to school in Brooklyn as well?
Yes.
Very cool.
Where is that?
Edward R. Murrow High School.
Excellent.
Very
Excellent.
cool.
There's a lot of great things going on at Edward R. Murrow.
I'm already a fan of your Facebook page, and I hope that other people find you on Facebook.
NYC Teens for Animals.
Yes, and hopefully those teens will then grow up into NYC Adults for Animals, because we need more people like Sophie in this world. And thank you so much for joining us today in our hen house, Sophie. We really enjoyed having you. And you, darling Beanie. We enjoyed you as well.
We did. Very much. And that's it from us hens today. Thank you so much for joining us here at our hen house. Remember, you can find our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and on the Our Hen House online magazine, which you can find at ourhenhouse.org. We look forward to seeing you with a brand new show next week.
Yes, next week right here. I wonder if Beanie will come back.
Yeah, maybe Beanie could become a regular.
A regular.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully Beanie will find a forever home.
Yes.
And then we'll be good to go.
Well, we'll still come back every week.
We'll still come back every week.
It'll be a requirement.
Our hen house is a squawking house. Our hen house is their hen house. Our hen house, ooh, it's a funky fresh house. Our hen house is your hen house.